Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. It is December 30th. Tomorrow, it's hard to believe, tomorrow is New Year's Eve. And start of 2026, of course. Anybody got any fun plans for New Year's? I really, I, uh, I don't know. I think I'm gonna do a show, two special shows. Um, I usually, again, I always do like seasonal shows. I always do a show for Halloween, Christmas, and Thanksgiving. Always do that. And I can't remember. I don't think I usually do a show on New Year's for New Year's, but I might have. I kind of can't remember if I do, but I'm thinking about doing a show up for New Year's Eve and then also New Year's Day. Because obviously it's significant. In some ways it's like the same old, but then in a lot of ways it is, really, it's a big kind of change. It's very significant. So I might do. I think I'm going to do a show for those kinds of things. Talking about what the year has been like. Good things, maybe some bad things, but mostly good things of things I'm looking forward to. Um, One thing I've been really super grateful for is the all the support I've been getting for this crazy channel and for my band Quantum and things like that, and then the band Osmia that I've been playing with this year. So there's been a lot of good things. So I might do a thing around that topic. As far as New Year's like itself, I used to play. There used to be an event every year in Belfast, Maine, called the New Year's by the Bay, and they had that concert series for I don't know, probably over 10 years, maybe more. And I had a pretty good connection with some of the people who used to run that whole kind of production, and what it was basically it was a bunch of music. They would New Year's by the Bay was basically this big New Year's Eve event where they would have multiple venues going all at the same time, and then they would book different bands, and they'd have all kinds of music. They had I don't know, something like 5 to 6 venues going at the same time, and they'd have like a dinner thing included. And then they'd have a parade, and it would obviously it's usually freezing cold on New Year's. Like right now, I just went outside a few minutes ago to heat up my music space, and it's brutal outside right now. It got really warm yesterday, and it was super rainy, and everything melted, and then it froze again overnight. So it's pretty icy and super cold. So New Year's, one thing that is not a fun thing, or that wasn't a fun thing back then when they had the New Year's by the Bay thing, was in order to go to all of the venues, because they would sell it as a thing of where you could get like a ticket or a pass and you could go to all the venues. You'd have to walk all over town, and it would be like freezing cold, and then like sometimes the wind gusts would be brutal. But usually it was a really cool event. They had all kinds of venues going, all kinds of music, food things going on. There'd be a ton of people usually in town. They would have this parade in the middle of Main Street, and then they'd have this giant bonfire down by the water in Belfast. And I was real fortunate for probably like at least 5 to 6 years, maybe more, but at least 5 or 6 years where I always had gigs playing for with different bands at these events, and it was really fun. I mean, we got to do early on when I started Quantum, which was like 10 years ago now. We were able to do. We did a couple of those gigs playing on New Year's Eve, and that was really fun. We did that pretty early on, maybe a year or two after we started the band. It's been a while since we've done it, but it was fun playing a New Year's Eve gig, and we would double up. Sometimes I'd be doing it with Quantum and then another band I was playing in or playing with at the time. And usually the pay was good, and it was usually a good time. There was usually good crowds, um, and the music would kind of none of the music would usually go till about midnight. It'd usually go till about 11:30, quarter to midnight, and then everybody would converge down to the bonfire for the actual, ball dropping. And so it was great. And then I don't know, it was probably 7 years ago. It was before COVID. About 7 years ago, they the one of the lead people who ran the whole kind of did all the booking. She kind of retired, and and then they were pretty disorganized. And then I think they tried bringing it back, but then COVID came, and then they never had it since then. So so and then after that, I used to play a lot at this really cool restaurant bar and grill called Fog Bar in Rockland. That was a really really great place back in the day. And again, that place closed and has never opened, never reopened. It's now a wine store where just they just sell wine. And but that was a real, I mean, at least for what it's worth, for my band Quantum, that was probably um, the most like important thing for us, and probably the most integral thing for us as as we became more of a band, and we became, you know, you know what it entails to, which initially with Quantum it was like purely a studio project. So having we played like a ton of gigs at Fog over the course of a few years. At one point, we actually had a residency for about 2 years where we were playing every month, or sometimes a couple times a month, and it was really cool because it was early on, and we did it right up until COVID, so about 5 years ago. And it was great because we really were able to develop the sound. It helped me a lot. I learned so much about playing there because we would have to like play for two types of audiences a lot of the times. Like it was a, kind of a little bit of a fine dining venue, so we'd have to like play when people are eating and learning how to deal with that, and which caused us to write a different style of music. And then we would play for the bar crowd, which would be the after. And so it was an awesome gig. It was one of the, I really feel like, for what it's worth, without having that gig and all of those gigs there, like the band wouldn't have evolved, or gotten to the places that it's gotten to even to today. That was a really really great, out of the, we've had some really good gigs, but that was like probably the most important gig for us as a band for our development. After the New Year's by the Bay thing ended, we started with a different band, um, Blind Albert, which was like kind of a blues funk band. We started playing. We did it like 2 or 3 years in a row where we were playing there for New Year's Eve, and it was super fun. It was great, the great parties. And then they closed after a few years of us doing that, and then they never reopened. So I haven't had a New Year's Eve gig since. Really, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't had a New Year's Eve gig, and it's funny because now, like, since then, the bands or people that I play with don't seem to be really into doing any booking for New Year's. They like to kind of hang out with their families and just chill out and stay home. And I don't have any connections anymore like I used to. Um, so I miss it, but then I don't know. I kind of don't. I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent to it. I would do it if I had gigs on New Year's, but it's been so long that I don't even. I'm kind of indifferent to it, I guess. But I might go see this really great DJ on New Year's uh, that I got to play with for a Halloween show. He's playing in Rockland, so I might go to that. But we'll see. We'll see what's going on. But yeah, the day tomorrow. It's hard to believe tomorrow is New Year's Eve already. So I'll do a show about New Year's Eve things, resolutions, if you will, and things that I'm looking forward to for next year, and things that I've been really grateful for. in 2025. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, today's show is going to be about more or less the worst movies and the most disappointing films that I saw of 2025. I uploaded yesterday a video on my favorite films of this year. So I kind of wanted to, since it's the end of the year, there's obviously so many movies that have come out every year. When you look back over the period of a whole year, I mean, that's a lot of films. And I have been going to the theater more, which has been really awesome. So I've kind of actually, between that and then probably with all the movies that I watch at home, which typically are older films, but I've seen so many movies. So, but as far as new releases go, it's pretty good. Quite a few. I got to see a lot of films in the theater, and I think overall, I've had more. There were quite a few films that I saw this year that I was really, that I really loved and that I really liked and that I was surprised by. More so, I was thinking about, okay, what movies, what experiences that I had this year that were just really not great or kind of lame when it comes to seeing films in the theater. And I had to think a little bit about it because again, I've seen a lot of movies, and I realized, oh, okay, the good outweighs the bad. So there was less bad movies or bad experiences, which I think is good. So, but today I'm going to be talking about a handful of movies that I didn't like, and then a few movies that I was really, really disappointed with for 2025. It's been kind of a funny experience because some movies that I've been thinking about, when I was thinking about movies that I was, going to talk about as far as my worst of lists, and I try to be positive. When I was thinking about I'm doing a video, since I did a video on my favorite films of 2025. I usually don't. I have done it in the past, but I don't usually do it every year. I don't usually do those kinds of videos, but I figured, what the hell, why not? And so when I was thinking about the movies that I wanted to talk about around the negative side of things, a few movies came up that I didn't necessarily think that they were bad, but they kind of, they're movies, a couple of movies that I'm just like not really excited, since it's been a lot of time since I gone to see them in the theater. There's been a few movies where I'm kind of like, I find myself not really excited to see them again, and I don't really have a craving. I saw them once, and then I'm just like, since there's been more distance since I've seen it, I just feel like the movie is, I feel more and more, I don't know, disconnected to those experiences. So yeah, it's kind of a funny thing, and that does happen. I mean, there's some films that I saw this year, and it happens in the past, where I can't wait to see it again, or I make a mental note that, okay, I'm definitely going to buy that on Blu-ray, when it comes out, or what have you. I mean, that is very much a thing. And then there's other times where, okay, you liked it, and then you kind of put it on the back burner for a little bit, and then you realize, wait, that experience is like falling further and further on the back end of things, and and it was a good, initially a pretty decent or good experience, but you don't feel like inclined to, like, oh, I can't wait to see that again, or I can't wait to, I need to buy that on Blu-ray. I don't know. It's funny. But two movies that it's kind of been the case of that, and these are both superhero movies. The new Fantastic Four movie that came out this year. I did see that in the theater, and it's been a while. It came out in, when did it come out? In 2025, but I think it came out in July. And then I also saw the new Superman in the theater. And Fantastic Four, like, I liked it when I saw it in the theater, but then I don't know. A couple of friends that I know that saw it, one that I went with, had lots of issues, actually with both films for Fantastic Four and Superman. And when it comes to Fantastic Four, again, I had a pretty good experience. I did enjoy it. I did think it was one of the better versions of those comic book characters. Growing up as a kid, I was always a pretty big fan of Fantastic Four. I never really felt they did those characters justice. I do like the Silver Surfer film. And there was one that came out a few years ago, which I can't remember the name of it, but it was a little bit more of a darker version, and it was pretty good. But so I went to see this new one, and I was, Pedro Pascal is in it, and I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I loved the kind of the '70s vibe of it, the '70s futurist vibe of it. But now, again, it's been quite a while since I've seen it. I feel like I am not really. I don't have any feelings to. Oh, I got to see it again because it's been out on DVD or Blu-ray for a while now, and I don't have any desire to like see it again. I definitely don't have a desire to buy it, and I'm just kind of like, eh. And it just kind of like I had a pretty good experience, and I did do a review for that film, and which I remember it was pretty positive, but now I'm just like, I don't, I had the experience, but I'm kind of like it's like a one and done experience. I don't really feel like inclined to see it again. There's nothing about it that I remember that makes me particularly excited, or I don't know. That happens sometimes when you go to the theater and you know in the moment you're having a good time or you're excited, and then maybe a day or two you kind of just forget about the experience, and sometimes it can be vice versa. But I think as far as the newer Fantastic Four movie, I'm just kind of like meh about it. I don't have any desire to see it again, really, or rent it, or definitely I don't have a desire to buy it. There's plenty of other things I'd rather buy. So, since it's been some time, I'm just kind of like, it was okay. It was okay. It wasn't great. But my opinions have changed on it, And again, I haven't seen it since, but I don't really have a desire for it. And then the newer Superman movie, which I was really excited about seeing. That was a movie I was when it comes to superhero movies, I was very very excited, and I do like James Gunn. I think sometimes, as of late, he's been kind of disappointing. I did not like the way he concluded the Guardians of the Galaxy films. I was really let down by that movie. That was a really big disappointment when that movie came out, which was couple of years ago, and I've just been kind of on this weird thing with him lately. I don't know. His earlier films I absolutely love, and I don't know. And so when it came to Superman, I was really excited to see it. And again, it was kind of that same experience. I saw it in the theater with some friends, and they all like kind of tore it apart. One friend liked it quite a bit, but not really at the same time, and they were just kind of burnt out of, the whole superhero fatigue syndrome that has, you know, has hit everyone, and including myself, where I was like, I am so not excited to see another Marvel movie, and then in this case, DC movie, because I've just felt like they haven't been able to get it right in so long. But I was excited to see Superman. It kind of got my interest again into seeing a superhero movie. And when I saw it, I liked it. My friends or group of friends that saw it had a lot of problems with it. Kind of, one thing after another, they were really pretty critical. But I was like, yeah, I liked it. I liked it. And then I did do a review for Superman, which I remember it was a real positive review. And I don't know, honestly, I kind of have that same feeling now that I do around Fantastic Four. Now that it's been quite a bit of time, and I just, it's not like, and again, with movies that I see, whether it's a rental or through Opera House Video or a movie I see in the theater, first time seeing it, if it's a movie I really really like, and maybe 6 months go by, maybe even more, I'll eventually probably see it again, and then there's a good chance of buying it on Blu-ray at some point. But I'll always think about that film, and it will be on my radar, and I'll still have that desire, even though there might be a long gap of time to see it a second time, because I do. I'm a big rewatcher of films. I will, if I'm into a movie, and if I'm in love with a particular movie, I'll, in a lot of ways, I'll treat that movie like it's a band, an album that's been put out by one of my favorite bands. Where I'll listen to it a shit ton of times. I do the same thing with movies. If I'm into a movie, I'll rewatch it numerous times. So in that situation, and there's been time that's in between, and maybe 6 months or maybe more. I'll still like think about that, and that will, I will still feel kind of pulled to have that experience again, to revisit the film. And but in this case, for both of these movies, I don't really feel that pull or that desire to do it again. I don't know. And I did give Superman a pretty good review. I did think it was a pretty good movie, but I'm just kind of indifferent to it now. I don't know. There's the new trailer for the Supergirl movie that's coming out. She was introduced in the new Superman movie, and I think the trailer did nothing for me for Supergirl. I don't know. So I don't know. It's a weird it's a weird thing. I think there's still a big thing that I'm suffering from, and that is called superhero or superhero film or superhero fatigue when it comes to movies. And I've always been a massive fan of, especially the earlier Marvel films, right up until Endgame and Spider-Man: Homecoming. Like, massive fan of the Marvel series, and massive Batman fan. And so it's not like it's a new thing for me, or I just wasn't into comic books. I've always had this deep love of all things comic book related. But just as a fan, I just feel like Marvel has really, just had misstep after misstep, many failures. And then when Superman came out, and then when Fantastic Four came out, which is a Marvel, I was like, it's pretty good, but I just, yeah, I'm kind of indifferent towards those movies now. Not that I'm saying, and I gave two good reviews for those films, but it's not like I'm saying they're terrible. I just don't feel any kind of desire to like see them again. Just kind of meh. And I've had that experience with a few other films this year where they're not necessarily bad, but they're just kind of like, just kind of there. There are a couple of movies I'm going to talk about which I was very disappointed with this year, but thankfully I feel like the list is relatively small. Well, another movie that kind of the same experience, and I did see it even more recently. I rented it on DVD. Was what is supposedly the final Mission Impossible movie, Dead Reckoning Part 2. I do consider myself a pretty big fan of the Mission Impossible movies. I do think they're a whole lot of fun. They're pretty consistent. I've always enjoyed those movies, and I I've always been a fan of you know more or less Tom Cruise. I've always been just blown away by his his vision and him doing his own stunts when it comes to these films. Like I feel like these movies, all of these movies have been such a big labor of love for him. He cares about his audience, I think, for the most part, but mainly I've always been just floored by his like insanity around performing his own stunts. Like, and overall, I definitely consider myself a fan of the franchise, and I think it's as far as an action franchise, they're all really great. For the most part, I own a few of them on DVD. I think I have one or two on Blu-ray. I've covered a lot of the. I do believe I've covered most of those movies, or not most of them, but I definitely have covered a handful. There's been a few I haven't seen in quite a few years, like especially the first one. But Dead Reckoning was supposed to be the conclusion to the whole series, and that was a movie that I rented. I didn't get a chance. I almost went to see it in the theater, but then I didn't. And I saw it at. I got it on DVD and I watched it over at my folks, and I think it was around Thanksgiving. And that movie is so so incredibly long. That movie is so fucking long, and I knew it was gonna be long, like just the actual length, because this was gonna be supposedly the end of this whole franchise, which it probably won't be. But and it's a very long movie, and we started out the night watching that film, and I was pretty tired at the end of it because it was so long. And but overall, I did like the movie quite a bit. I thought when it got to the third and final act with some of the action sequences, the plane sequence in the last film is pretty breathtaking. But the first act and second act are actually really really slow, like really really slow. But at the time, I was into it, and I was really wanting to see where this was going to go. And right when I was thinking it was gonna, like the energy of the film was gonna be ramping up, it felt like it was kind of stepping back again. And I know a lot of people did have criticized this movie, and I do think in a weird way it's like the slowest film in the franchise. And I kind of feel like they were trying to go for this like thing of like building the intensity, and intentionally having this film as a little bit of a slow burn pace to where when they finally get to the action set pieces, it was going to be mind blowing. And some of the action set pieces are pretty amazing, without a doubt. But it is very slow. It is very very slow, and I don't know. Like again, I had the same experience. Like I liked it when I saw it, but I'm like, I don't know. Now, and I did do a review for it when after watching it, and I remember it being a pretty positive review. But I've had that same reaction where I'm like, I don't know. It is pretty fucking slow, and I don't know if I want to sit through a movie that's like, I don't know, 3.5 hours, and it feels longer. I've had that experience too, where I'll watch a movie. Well, even a good example, and I think it's definitely a flawed movie, but overall, I did like it a lot. For the most part, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. I got to see that in the theater before it went to just strictly streaming on Netflix, and I had heard that movie. Some of the criticisms were about the length of that film, that it was a little bit too long. And it is a long movie, but I real feel I do I do feel that the pacing was actually really great, and I never felt it dragged. I never was like checking the time, checking my phone. I had other problems with the film, but mainly with the writing. but I didn't think it dragged. But I will say, there were times in the newer, the latest Mission Impossible movie where I definitely felt it was kind of dragging ass. And by the end of it, again, I did like it, and some of the action sequences were amazing, especially the plane sequence, which is like unbelievable. But because of the length, and I did feel the burn during watching when I watched it. I remember having that feeling when I watched it for the first time and only time. That man, this is long. This is like, I mean, you gotta. This is a movie you gotta pack a lunch to. Like, bring a fucking picnic, or and make sure you know, if I saw it in the theater, you know, I would have had to have gone probably outside, take a break, and go to the bathroom, you know. But so because of the length, and I did feel it. I did feel it did drag. That I don't think I would see it again. I don't know. Even though I did like it. So you know, these three movies kind of have that same thing around my, you know, my connection to them, where I'm just like, they were good. I enjoyed them, but I'm not. They're just kind of meh to me now, and not something I'm like chomping at the bit to see again at all, really. And it's changed. It's changed over time. My desire, or my thoughts about those films. I think the reviews I put out for those movies was pretty, you know, for the most part, pretty spot on as far as how I felt. And I typically, when I do a review, I always usually wait, you know, a good 24 hours, maybe a few more days, but usually I always wait a good 24 hours to until I do a review or talk about a movie. You know, just to kind of let the movie or that experience kind of just, you know, sink in a little bit, because that will often, the next day or 24 hours, that if you're still excited or you're not thinking about the movie at all, that really says a lot to what your experience was. So that's typically, you know, why I wait. But overall, I just have this kind of melancholy feeling towards those movies, and they're just kind of meh. And I'm definitely not chomping at the bit to see them. And they're not movies that I'm like, I don't know, talking about with friends and being like, hey, you should really recommend this movie. Or, you know, if you have Marvel fatigue, you should see the new Fantastic Four or the new Superman, because that will change, that will cure your Marvel fatigue. I'm not having that conversation with anybody. So, yeah, just kind of out there in the ether. It's very strange. And they're just kind of there right now for me. These next two movies, and again, I find, you know, that because I do see a lot of movies, you know, it's inevitable that I'm gonna leave something out, you know, because I realized yesterday when I did, or the day before yesterday when I did the video for my top movies of 2025, there was a movie that I really wanted to talk about, but I totally forgot, and that was Ari Aster's Eddington, which I thought was such a great movie, and going to see that in the theater, it was super intense, and I meant to talk about that in that show, but I, you know, forgot. And so it's an honorable mention in this video that Eddington, from the last Ari Aster movie, I thought that movie was just awesome. Super, super wild. What a bonkers movie. But anyway, these last two movies I'm going to talk about are movies that I was really, really disappointed with, especially the last one. And again, in this, I guess you could say, when I did the video for my best or my favorite films of the year, it wasn't necessarily in a order. In an order, I think the top two or three were kind of in an order, and I had this like crazy thing where I had like three movies that were almost tied for first place. You know, the Long Walk, One Battle After Another, and then a movie I just saw on Sunday, The Secret Agent. And I did that. I talked about. I just uploaded the review for that, but that did not make my list because I made the list before seeing that movie. But those three films for me are kind of like tied, which hasn't really happened. So it's a loose, list. It's somewhat in order, but this list for the movies that I just have arrived at a place where I'm not really caring about, or just movies that I was really disappointed with. I would say that the order is pretty accurate with how I've been, you know, if I was gonna put all of these movies, 1 through 5, this is pretty accurate, pretty spot on. And again, I will probably, after I do this video, I will probably realize, oh wait, shit, I didn't talk about this movie or that movie, and blah blah blah. But so, and then the other thing is, I'm obviously, because I do see a lot of movies, I'm trying to stick to. I'm only talking about movies that I saw that came out this year. So, and I watch a lot of older films, so it's hard sometimes to remember. But one movie I was really, well, I wouldn't say I was like super excited about. I almost thought about when it came out. I thought about going to see it in the theater, and that is F1 the movie, the newer, more recent Brad Pitt racing movie. And I believe I did a show on that movie. Um, I saw it actually when I watched the last Mission Impossible movie. That was an insane night. It was Thanksgiving night, and we started off the night. It was at my parents'. I had gotten a few movies, like I do, and we started off the night with Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part Two, and then we watched F1 the movie afterwards. And my God, my brain. I thought my brain was going to explode. I was so fucking exhausted after watching both of these movies, because they're both, well, the first half of Mission Impossible is not the case, but it was mainly the length that took its toll on me. I was so wiped out at the end of both of these movies, like just watching two incredibly long, high octane action movies, like where it's just like so over the top and kind of ridiculous. And we start out with Mission Impossible, which was like, 3.5 hours. And so we were gonna watch possibly three movies, but by the end of F1, I was tapped out. I was like, I'm done. I can't. And that says a lot for me when I was exhausted. I'm like, I can't do this. And the movies are not, they're not films you necessarily have to like really think about or do a lot of thinking while you're watching it, especially F1. Especially F1. But man, I was wiped out, and my family, my mom and dad, were just like exhausted. And usually they'll keep going. I mean, on Christmas Day, we watched like 4 movies, and it was like we were ready. We were in it to win it. So pretty funny. The most movies, the longest experience that I ever had watching movies, and I've never really come close since then. But there are times where I'll watch 2 or 3 movies easily. Sometimes I've even, not that long ago, I think I watched like 4 movies at home, like on a Sunday, and I started them like relatively early, and I just kept going, and I was like, oh, I'm not tired, I'll just keep going. Generally, I don't though. I usually do like, after about 2 movies, I start getting a little tired. But I usually always watch one, at least one a night. But the most insane experience I ever had was years ago. I went to a New Year's Day party. It was actually right before COVID. And a friend of mine had a New Year's Day party, and we were gonna do a big movie watch day, and the whole plan was for us to watch all 3 director's cuts of the Lord of the Rings movies, the first 3, the Fellowship, the Two Towers, and then Return of the King. And we were going to watch all 3 of the director's cuts, which are quite a bit longer than the theatrical cuts by like an hour and a half, I do believe. And so one movie was, 4.5 hours or so. Like, And so the whole goal was to like we were gonna watch all of them, and we did, and it was fucking intense. We started at like noon, 12:30, and then and then by midnight we finished Return of the King. We didn't take any breaks. We just kept going. We had like we met in the morning, late morning, and had breakfast there. He made all this great food, and we brought food and beer and stuff, and we had breakfast, and we started fellowship, and then as the movie was playing, all of us had all we'd all seen these movies before, so it wasn't like first time watching. Then there was a little lunch break, but we were while the movies were playing, and then we had a dinner break later on, and and there was probably like 15 people there, and by the end of the night, like by 11 o'clock, it was just me and one or two other people that were still watching the movies. Everybody else was done, cashed out, exhausted. They left. Yeah, yeah, it was hilarious. That was the most intense, continuous watching I've ever seen of films, like in just one stretch. But so today, this next movie I'm going to talk about is Brad Pitt's F1, and I do like Brad Pitt. I do like him as a director, and I did do a review of this film. But this movie was so I was again I almost saw it in the theater, but then I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't because this movie was just super disappointing. I thought it was going to be, I talk a lot about that movie, which to me is a primetime example of it's a sports movie, and I'm not a sports guy at all. But it shouldn't. You shouldn't have to be a sports guy if it's a movie. Like I think of movies like Hoosiers or The Natural. Like they're sports movies, and I'm not a sports guy at all. But there's those movies are just so well done. It shouldn't matter. I should just enjoy the fucking movie. And when Brad Pitt did Moneyball, and I do like a lot of his films, when Brad Pitt did Moneyball, that movie is about the Oakland A's, and that's a thing I could really care. I could care, you know, I could give two shits about baseball and the Oakland A's. But that movie is so great and so interesting and so well written, so well acted. And I kind of felt maybe F1 was going to do that. I know this was going to be a high octane, kind of racing movie. But it was so. This movie was so paint by numbers. It was just so generic. It had like every fucking cliche that you could think of, virtually every cliche you could think of, and it's like all thrown into this movie. And they tried to make it, like I guess it kind of hints at times during this movie. They kind of hint a little bit, or kind of bring this story into maybe a little bit of like uncharted territory where it starts kind of getting interesting and maybe not so like cliched, but ultimately it was not very strong where they went. It wasn't. They didn't go. It wasn't enough. I felt, and ultimately the movie just got totally weighed down by every damn bad cliche that you would see in a movie that is a sports movie, like a movie that if it's a basketball film or a football film, you have to be a fan to see it. And that's not the kind of movie I want to see. I want to see a good movie. I want to have that experience. And maybe I'll if it's about a subject that I don't know anything about or nor do I really care, I might find it interesting and maybe learn something from it or whatever. But it should just be a good movie. And this movie was so paint by numbers, and I was like, that movie was super disappointing. I was really um, bummed out by that movie. Not that it was something I was like looking forward to that much, but I was really glad that I did not see it in the theater because, man, it was so just one cliche after another for what you would expect from like just a big budget Hollywood, you know, sports movie. I mean, it was just like, come on. Yeah, it was really bad. And it's got a great cast and had a lot of potential, but I was like, what the hell? Like, really? I mean, we've seen this. We've seen this so many times. It was, and then it got to this point where there were so many things in the story that were just so utterly implausible and ridiculous, and just it was unbelievable, but very disappointing. This F1 was not a good movie at all. I don't think compared to Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning. I think Mission Impossible is better, but F1 the movie was. I was very disappointed with that movie. We did watch it all the way through. I don't know how we got through it because it was so exhausting, and it's very long, a very long movie. And I have put up a review for that film. So, um, yeah, yeah. So this next movie is a movie that the last movie I'm going to talk about was a movie that I was just it made me angry. I wanted my money back. I was just so utterly disappointed. It even like reduced the director who made uh, this movie that I'm going to be talking about, and it's going to be the last movie. It's definitely the number one movie of the year as far as the worst movie I've ever. The worst movie that I saw this year, and the biggest disappointment, without a doubt. And I think that this movie was uh, literally a pile of trash, and I was so disappointed with that movie that with the director who made that movie. I was a big fan of his films, and it was so bad that I was like, it actually diminished my value of how I regard that this particular director. Like I don't hold him in that high of a regard anymore. It's weird. That has happened sometimes. Like I do feel like that's happened twice. More with like big franchises, but like one example would be for the Matrix films. I love the Wachowski brothers, and I was a big fan of like Bound, the first film, and then the first Matrix, which I think is a masterpiece. And I was so utterly disappointed with the rest of the films in the trilogy. I mean, just I couldn't believe what happened and what transpired. And then also 2 years ago they had the fourth Matrix came out, which is just an abomination. And I despise those movies and was so let down and disappointed with those movies so much that it has definitely diminished on how I even look at the first Matrix. Like it really, I still think it's a masterpiece, but I'm like, all of the movies since then have been just so bad that it's not a movie. Like I'm reaching or wanting to see that less because of that movie, which is kind of fucked up. That's happened also with the Star Wars franchise. The New Hope and Empire Strikes Back are my favorite films, but since everything that's happened in the Star Wars universe, which has been really pretty fucking dismal, I find myself reaching less to see those movies again. Where those movies were movies I would always revisit, and then the same thing happened with the Lord of the Rings films. The first three films, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King, they were masterpieces. And since then, there's been three or four Lord of the Rings movies that are just, again, just uh, awful and so incredibly disappointing that it's diminished my value of how highly, how highly my regard is for those movies. And so that happens. That definitely happens. So, but this movie that I'm going to talk about now, which is this number two movie and it wasn't a terrible movie. It had some very cool things, sort of around about it. There were definitely things around it that I thought were interesting and cool. but ultimately I was so let down, and that is the as Predator Badlands. I was so fucking disappointed with this movie. I really was. I was so looking forward to seeing this movie because I really loved Prey. I thought Prey is easily the best movie in the franchise, and I felt like it's right up there with the one that started it all, Predator with Schwarzenegger. Like, I felt like this movie, Prey, was because it was new, it was fresh, it was exciting, it really delivered the goods on all fronts, and I was really excited because I always felt okay. The Predator character is a essentially a movie monster alien or a character, a fantasy character that they can put him in any possible, like they can put him in any kind of period piece film that you can imagine, and he's really versatile that way. So when they did what the team did, the filmmakers did with Prey, I was like, wow, this is exciting, and I was like, this is fresh, this is new. It's not trying to do this or that. They're just telling a new story that is really good and just really satisfying. So the same team was going to be also doing this new one, Predator Badlands, and it was going to be a totally different story centered on this younger predator and this whole kind of like struggle that he's going through in order to kind of basically prove his for him to be a warrior. And I remember seeing a trailer for it, and I was like, yeah, this is. It looks pretty cool. It looked like really, the first trailer. I was like, this is like totally eye popping, sci-fi, like way sci-fi based and very, really fantasy based, and it looked really really awesome. And then when I heard that the movie was actually going to be getting a PG-13 rating, I was a little bit disappointed with that because I was like, okay, and I know the premise of the story was going into it was that there weren't going to be necessarily human characters. They were going to be mostly alien characters and alien, various alien races. Um, so I was still open to that, and I saw it in a theater, and I was so disappointed with this movie. I was looking forward to it so much, and I just felt like this movie, in a nutshell, for me was it felt like, and again, Disney owns everything, but I felt like this is a Disney family Predator movie. Like this is a Predator movie. You can take the whole family and enjoy it as if it's a Pixar movie. I mean, because it was very family friendly. It felt like almost like a G-rated film. And yeah, again, visually, there's some things about the movie that I liked. I thought the opening sequence was pretty cool. I liked that they do kind of get a little bit more into the lore of how the mechanics of how the predator functions as a creature, and it's like its mythology. I thought that was kind of interesting, but essentially I was like, this is like a Pixar movie. And it's like a buddy movie, and it had all of this really forced or shoehorned humor throughout the movie. Um, with Elle Fanning playing this um, robot essentially, and it's like this buddy movie. And there were so many moments in the film where I was like, "This is so obvious. Obvious. This is obviously such a movie that they really wanted to desperately, appeal to a family kind of demographic. I think on one hand they try to appeal to Predator fans and to horror and science fiction fans, but I thought they utterly failed in that department. And I was so excited about this movie. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this is a family rated, uh, a family friendly Predator film with all of these tropes of like the buddy movie. And if you watch, if you watch a Disney Pixar movie, and some are good, some are not, but they do follow this very formulaic. plan, and I'm like, this movie is a carbon copy of that. This is not a Predator movie. And I was so disappointed with this movie. I'm like, what is this? What is going on here? Like, why are they taking this, like, essentially just such a badass character and just watering it down? And it's like, I don't need to know. Like, that's one of the strengths, going back to the beginning of the Predator franchise. That's one of the strengths of the first movie, and I think it's one of, in general, it's a strength that really works for good movies. Is like, as an audience member, as a, going into the to a movie, sometimes what you don't know about a character or its origins is almost more important, because it leaves a little bit up to your imagination. You don't need to know. Nowadays, with we're so inundated with IPs and remakes and like sequels, and where studios are just like, if they have an IP or some kind of established film or films, they, and again, it's nothing new, but they do it even more so now. They got to milk the fucking shit out of it and try to explore every facet of these characters, or and this whole backstory, and have to like go into all of these things that, as a viewer, I don't really need to know that. I love the first Predator so much because, I think it's my favorite Schwarzenegger film, and it's one of the greatest, science fiction horror films ever made. Super suspenseful, super gory, and it's just really, really great. And I love that the Predator character is essentially this kind of mysterious character that you don't know a whole lot about. You get little glimpses of it here and there, but that's what I love about that film, is that it's really just, it's centered in the here and now in that story, and the concentration of these characters trying to survive in the midst of being picked off one by one by this killing machine that is superior to them. And you get these little glimpses or little things about who this Predator is, and maybe where he's from or what he does. And it's enough. I don't need to fucking know every goddamn thing about like his like family struggles, and like the clan kind of mentality that they come from, the planet that they come from, the origins, how far they go back. Sure, that can be interesting, but I don't need to know all of that. Like, it's it leaves a little bit up to my imagination, and they give me just enough information, especially in that first movie, where it's satisfying. That's all I need. It's and I think of another movie that is really a really great example of that, is Ridley Scott's Alien. It's like there's no real backstory at all about any of the characters, how they got there, who they are. You get these little glimpses of who some of these characters are, and that's enough. You don't need to like go into this whole big fucking thing about making a prequel or taking a deep dive. It's like, no, it's like, I think less is more. What you don't know is often something that is maybe far more interesting than, as opposed to like having everything laid out in front of you and everything needs to be explained, and how this person got to this place, or and it's like, I thought they're I think where the Predator franchises now, they've gone completely off the rails as far as having to explain things, like, and I feel like it doesn't push in all actuality, it doesn't push the franchise ahead. It actually pulls it back. But Predator Badlands, again, there were certain things I did kind of like. The central main character of the younger Predator, I liked some of the things around the action in the beginning of the film, and what have you. But ultimately, I was so utterly disappointed with this film. In a nutshell, it's a family friendly Pixar movie, and it's a buddy movie. It's got all of this, and the humor in this in the film is just like utterly ridiculous, like cringeworthy. And I'm like, what? Why are they doing this? And it was definitely, it wasn't a movie I would say I totally fucking hated, even though I sound like that. It does sound like that's what I'm saying, but it was definitely, it had some redeeming qualities. But I felt overall, I was so utterly disappointed. I left the theater just kind of shrugging my head, and I'm like, what is going on here? If it didn't have any redeeming quality, then it would have been the number one in the list. But this Predator Badlands is number two for me, easily. Very disappointing movie. So now for the final movie that is definitely that I'm going to talk about today, and definitely the number one film when it comes to the most disappointing film going experience I've had this year, and easily the worst movie of this year, hands down. It made me so it. I mean, movies are meant to be entertainment, and you can't take things too seriously. Um, you know, and even if it's a movie, so you should just enjoy it, and it's not like life or death. But movies are very important to me, and if but you have to, it's entertainment, so you can't take it too seriously. It's what it is. But I left this movie angry. It put me in a bad mood, like legitimately, where I was like, okay, I want to get my fucking money back. I was like, fuck this movie, fuck this studio. I was so excited about this movie. I was so looking forward to it, and that is Wolfman by Lee Winnell, put out by Blumhouse. And Lee Winnell, up until seeing Wolfman, was an awesome director. I mean, he's made some great films. I loved his Invisible Man movie that came out a few years ago. I think that movie is badass. He did another film called Upgrade, which is so awesome. This body horror, science fiction horror film that is just fantastic. He's produced some really good films. He's written some great films. He's responsible for the Saw franchise. He wrote both. I do believe he wrote both films. Saw both of the first two Saw films. He wrote the scripts and actually starred in the first one. He's a super talented guy, and I think some of the movies he's done have been just fantastic. So I was so excited when it was announced that he was going to be doing a Wolfman movie, because I'm like, wow, okay, he did such a cool thing with the Invisible Man that I was like, and again, when it comes to horror movies, when it comes, and especially when it comes to, say, Universal monster movies, I'm a Wolfman guy through and through. Werewolf movies are my favorite, without a doubt. I love vampire movies, and mummy movies about the mummy, Frankenstein movies, Dracula. I mean, you name it. I love that shit. But I am my favorite kind of monster or creature feature kind of film is a really good werewolf movie. You give me The Howling, or any of the great Paul Naschy films. I'm happier than a pig in shit. Like, that's my favorite genre. And the thing is, like, with that genre, there's a lot of films in the genre, but nowhere's near as many as, say, vampire films or even films about Dracula. They're just, and the same goes for Frankenstein. So my anticipation to see this, knowing it was directed by Lee Winnell, and I think he was going to be co-writing it, was through the roof after coming off the heels of the Invisible Man. I was like chomping at the bit to see it. Because I had heard originally their intent, Bloomhouse, and with Lee Winnell at the helm, is they were gonna like do do these various kind of newer, modern, contemporary versions of the Universal monsters, and that the Invisible Man was going to be the first one, and they were gonna do a Wolfman one, and maybe do some others. And I was like, wow, this is exciting as hell, and I was super excited. And I remember seeing the trailer for the Wolfman in the theater, and I was like, wow, okay, this looks kind of awesome. It looked unique, it looked a little bit different, and it looked like a good werewolf movie. And then, like, a couple of months after I saw the trailer, I saw a still or a photo of the Wolfman creature or the Wolfman design, when I first saw it, I was like, this is a joke, or this is like CGI, or AI, or this isn't real. It's a fan made thing. I'm like, this looks like shit. This can't be what the werewolf looks like. And for a while I thought it was just some kind of bullshit thing that you see online. It was just fake or whatever. And I thought that for a while. And then when I saw the movie, I was like, no, wait, oh my god, that's the actual fucking design for the Wolfman. Like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, it was so utterly ridiculous. I was just like, with technology today, and all of the effects companies that are around, and there's also, which has been a really cool trend. It feels like with newer horror films, they've been kind of circling back to using more practical effects. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And then when I saw the design, I thought it was a joke. I didn't believe it. So I'm like, this looks like crap. And that this is not even resembling anything that even looks like a werewolf. It looked like a homeless drunk, or it looked like a homeless heroin addict. And I'm like, what is going on here? That's what I thought the photo was of. And then when I saw the movie, I couldn't believe that that was the actual design. It was even more disappointing seeing the actual creature design. And I have to say, when I saw this movie, it was painful. It was incredibly slow. I could not believe how bad the writing was for the Wolfman. I kind of felt this movie was so bad that I felt, is this like kind of a joke to the audience? Like, are they like, is this a real thing? Are they like really fucking with people here? Like, this can't be real. Like, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Because I felt like the writing was so bad. I couldn't believe it was a Lee Winnell film because it didn't have any of his like kind of trademark, things that I love about him, where he like is really good at building suspense, really great at setting up a shot for various scenes. And I'm like, this movie could have been directed by anybody. It had zero suspense. I thought the characters were absolutely soulless. There was no chemistry. It was super boring, and it had zero. This was like, I'm not a big fan of like always for films or genre films to always use the same tropes, but sometimes it's cool when that's put into a story. And this movie needed at least one or two to make it work, of what you would see or feel like. It would make it feel like a werewolf film, as far as maybe the transformation, or shots of the wilderness, or shots of even a full moon, or those things that you would kind of expect to see. And this film had none of those at all. Like, and I feel like this movie has like absolutely no redeeming quality ever, in any way, shape, or form. I was so disappointed with this film. I left the film angry, and I know it's just a movie, but I'm a big fan of Lee Winnell, and I spent my hard-earned money to go see this movie, and I had been looking forward to it for well over a year. And the werewolf genre is my favorite genre out there, and I'm like, this movie was just a shit show, total shit show. And it had on paper a really good cast, which I was excited about, and they were like wooden paper cardboard cutouts as far as characters. There was no emotion, emotionality to any of these characters. I could care less about any of the people on the screen. There was zero suspense. It felt like this film tried so hard to not be a werewolf film, which I did not understand in any way, shape, or form. They tried to make this whole thing about a disease, like it's the whole idea of becoming a werewolf, and what that entails is, it was treated as like it was some kind of disease, or a virus. and it got away from any kind of anything resembling a horror, a werewolf film. Anything, not even close. And it was so unbelievable. I could not believe it. It was, and some of the writing, the dialogue in this film was cringeworthy, and I'm like, are you what? Like, and I was dumbfounded after I watched this movie because I'm like, wait, Lee Winnell. I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and again, I'm a big fan. He's a really smart guy, and he like totally gets it. And he's a smart guy, and I'm like, how did he let this fucking movie out? Like, doesn't he has some brain cells? Like, did he even watch this film, or like what's going on here? And yeah, I was. It's the biggest, hardest pass of a movie I could ever talk about. Yeah, yeah, easily the Wolfman, the biggest disappointment this year, and probably one of the biggest disappointments in seeing a movie in recent time, not just this year, but an absolutely awful movie. And I was so outraged or just taken aback by this movie that it really did kind of diminish my feelings of, because I, up until seeing The Wolfman, I looked at Lee Winnell as a director and a creator in the horror genre as like a really important figure. I kind of put him on this pedestal, as far as being a really great contemporary artist in the genre, and it diminished that. Now I'm like, I almost could care less what he does next. So, but that's my whole list. That was a long video. So thanks again, and we will see you soon. Peace.